There is one line from the Game of Thrones finale that many people watched but immediately forgot. It is spoken quietly, almost casually, which is precisely why it is so easy to miss. Tyrion Lannister had just delivered a speech. He had proposed a new king to the Council of Lords, and Bran Stark, who had sat on the sidelines throughout the 8th episode with a vacant stare, saying he needed nothing, replied with 4 words, "Why do you think I came here?" The hall fell silent. The audience, for the most part, remained silent too. Yet those 4 words encapsulate the entire meaning of what has unfolded over the course of 8 seasons. Because if the three-eyed raven knew who would end up on the Iron Throne, we've got a serious problem. He knew about Euron's ambush on Daenerys' ships. He knew she would burn the city. He knew Jon would become the killer of the woman he loved. And he didn't warn anyone. Not a single word. Not a single warning. He just sat there, waiting. And at the right moment, he spoke 4 words. Today, we're going to take an honest look at this theory. We'll gather the evidence, put each piece to the test, and try to answer the question fans have been asking since 2019. Did Bran Stark win Game of Thrones fairly? Or was he a puppet master whom no one noticed precisely because the most inconspicuous players win most often? Before formulating a theory, we need to establish a firm footing. What constitutes the canon? What do we know for certain? And what are our starting points? Bran Stark fell from the tower at Winterfell in the first episode of the first season. Jaime Lannister pushed him because Bran had caught him at an inopportune moment. The boy survived, but was left unable to walk. From that moment on, his journey towards becoming who he would eventually be began. Gradually, after several seasons of training beyond the wall, Bran became known as the Three-Eyed Raven, the last Green Sur, a man who can see the past, witness events in the present on the other side of the world, and it seems, receive visions of the future. In Season 6, the old Three-Eyed Raven, played by Max von Sydow, utters a line that has become central to any analysis of this theory. He tells Bran that the past is already written, that the ink has dried. It sounds like a limitation, as if Bran can only observe, but not intervene. Yet in that very same season, the Hodor incident takes place. Bran is in a vision of the past, and simultaneously finds himself in the present. Mira shouts, "Hold the door!" and Bran somehow transmits this command to the past. Young Willis, who was never meant to know anything, hears these words, and they literally shatter his mind. From that day on, he can only say one word, "Hodor, hold the door." This is not merely a tragic scene that all viewers remember. It is proof that the ink is not quite dry. Bran influenced the past. Bran shaped the present. Words spoken at one point in time destroyed someone's life at another. And this is precisely what brings us to the central question. If Bran could unconsciously rewrite someone else's fate through a vision, what prevented him from doing so consciously? As for the final outcome, actor Isaac Hempstead Wright confirmed in an interview with HBO that Bran's coronation was one of 2 elements that George R.R. Martin shared with the showrunners from his plans for the books. The first, Hodor's story. The second, Bran would become king. In the book about the making of the series Fire Can't Kill a Dragon, the showrunners confirmed that Bran's coronation is one of 3 incredible moments that Martin revealed to them at a meeting in 2013, alongside Shireen's death and Hodor's story. This wasn't made up by the series writers, it was Martin. And that means the question of exactly how Bran ended up on the throne will, in some form, be significant in the book version of the story as well. Now, regarding the difference between the book and the TV series, which is important to note right away. In the books, the character is called the Three-Eyed Raven, not the Three-Eyed Sparrow, as in some translations. And in the books, the Three-Eyed Raven, that is the Bloody Raven, Brandon Rivers, and Bran Stark are 2 different characters, mentor and apprentice. Bran has not yet completed his transformation. By the end of the 6th season, however, the series had made Bran a fully fledged Three-Eyed Raven, replacing the mentor. This is a fundamental difference for our theory. It works specifically for the TV series version, where Bran already possesses the power in full. Here's the dividing line. Everything we've just discussed are facts. Beyond that lies the realm of theories. But before we step into it, one important clarification. When we say Bran could see the future, we're referring to a specific version of the character from the series, not the Bran from the books, who is still learning and about whom we know far less. It is specifically the TV series Three-Eyed Raven, the one shown to us in seasons 7 and 8, sitting in a chair, gazing through people, warging into ravens, uttering strange lines. This version of the character possesses the full abilities of a green seer, and it is this version we are working with. Let's move on. The first clue appears in the 7th season. For a long time, I thought it was just a simple narrative device, a symbolic gesture. Then I watched the scene again and began to have my doubts. Littlefinger visits Bran at Winterfell. He brings him a gift, a dagger made of Valyrian steel. It is the very same dagger that a hired assassin tried to use to kill Bran back in the 1st season, when the boy lay unconscious after falling from the tower. The story of this blade runs throughout the entire series. Littlefinger took it from Catelyn Stark, used it to frame Tyrion, and indirectly spark the War of the Five Kings. He then kept it with him for a long time, either as a trophy or simply as a reminder of the past. And now he hands it to Bran. Speaking of the chaos all around and how hard it is to live in these troubled times, Bran listens. Then he utters 4 words. Chaos is a ladder. This is a line Littlefinger uttered in a private conversation with Varys in the 3rd season. Bran wasn't present in that scene. None of the Starks were there. It was a conversation between 2 people behind closed doors, and the point of it was that Littlefinger openly admitted his philosophy of life: to sow disorder and use it to climb the ladder. Chaos is not a pit into which you fall. Chaos is a ladder you can climb. Bran couldn't have known those words from anywhere else. There was only one possibility. He had witnessed that scene. He had glimpsed into the past at that very moment, in that very room, which meant he knew about Littlefinger long before he'd uttered a single word. He knew of his role in Ned Stark's death. He knew of the plan involving Sansa. He knew that this man was dangerous. And yet, despite all that, he told Sansa nothing specific. He did not list the crimes. He did not reveal the evidence. He simply uttered 4 words and fell silent. Now, a fair question: could this simply be a way of showing the viewer that Bran has become the Three-Eyed Raven and can now see everything? A demonstration of power without manipulation? That's a fair point. The scene works both as a symbol and as a blow to Littlefinger, and as a dramatic moment when the viewer realizes Bran is different now. The writers may not have intended anything more than that. But here's what caught my attention as I delved deeper. Immediately after this scene, Bran hands the dagger to Arya. Not Sansa, not to Jon, to Arya, specifically, the girl who has been trained to kill silently and precisely, who knows how to move unnoticed, who needs a light, fast, deadly blade. And it is with this very dagger, in the 3rd episode of the 8th season, that Arya kills the Night King. The weapon intended to kill Bran in the 1st season saved Bran from the greatest threat in the finale. It could have been a nice coincidence on the part of the writers. It could have. But if we accept that Bran could see the future, then handing the dagger to Arya specifically looks like a conscious choice. He placed the weapon exactly where it needed to be. Without explanation, he simply handed it over. Let's leave it at that. But before moving on to the next clue, it's worth mentioning this. There is another detail surrounding this dagger scene that is easy to miss. Hempstead Wright himself revealed in an interview with Insider that when Bran holds the dagger in his hands and looks at it, he played the scene as follows. Bran sees the dagger's future. He sees where it will end up. The actor thought that the dagger would kill Littlefinger, but then it turned out that its purpose was even greater: the killing of the Night King. So, in the performance of this scene, it was already implied that Bran knows something about the fate of this blade, and the fact that he gave it specifically to Arya and not to someone else becomes a choice rather than a random gesture. Later, I found something considerably more significant, and this is difficult to explain away as a mere coincidence. The second clue concerns the Battle of Winter, the 3rd episode of the 8th season. Bran sits by the old god tree and waits for the Night King. He agreed to be the bait himself. He proposed this plan at the War Council himself, whilst the others were discussing strategy. This is important. It wasn't Jon or Daenerys who came up with the idea of using him as bait. It was Bran who raised the issue himself. When asked, "Why does the Night King need you specifically?" Bran replied, that the Night King wants to destroy memory, that it is the three-eyed raven who holds that memory. It sounds reasonable. It sounds like self-sacrifice. But if one accepts the theory, it also sounds like a conscious choice of position on the chessboard. He placed himself exactly where he needed to be placed. But here's the strange thing. At some point, whilst battles rage all around and people are dying by the hundreds, Bran slips into a vision. He wargs into a flock of ravens. The audience sees him soaring above the battlefield. He flies towards the Night King, who is sitting atop a dead dragon. He hovers nearby, and then he simply returns. No action, no explanation. No one in the series ever explained what that warging meant. Daenerys didn't know, Jon didn't ask, Bran didn't say. The writers deliberately left this moment in the dark. But immediately afterwards, the Night King turns and walks straight towards Bran by the tree, as if something or someone had shown him the way. The simplest explanation: Bran was monitoring the enemy's position. Strategic surveillance, nothing out of the ordinary. But there is a more complex theory. Bran was luring the Night King to him because he knew Arya was nearby, because he knew that right by that tree, with that very dagger he'd given her a few months earlier, she would be ready. He'd set all the pieces in place beforehand: the dagger, Arya, the tree, himself as bait. And then he simply waited. Now, a fair point, this interpretation relies too heavily on because, none of which is backed up by a direct line of dialogue or on-screen action. Arya killed the Night King of her own accord. Melisandre merely nudged her into action by reminding her of the blue eyes. No coordination from Bran, no order, no instructions. That's a fair point. This clue is, in itself, weaker than the first one, but it doesn't stand alone. It's part of a pattern. And the next element of this pattern is the most important. How many times did Bran know something important and choose to remain silent? 3 instances. There are at least 3 occasions when Bran knew something that could have saved lives, yet chose to remain silent. Let's examine each of them in detail. First, Euron Greyjoy's fleet. In Season 7, Euron ambushes Daenerys and Theon's ships off the coast of Dorne. He captures Yara, kills the princesses of Dorne, and wipes out a significant part of the allied coalition. This radically alters the balance of power. Daenerys loses key allies and part of her fleet. Her military position weakens, and this has consequences for her entire future strategy. By this point, Bran is already the three-eyed raven. He uses the ravens to observe events in various parts of the world. The ambush does not happen instantly. The fleet is on the move, an attack is being prepared, and Euron needs time to maneuver. All of this could have been foreseen. Bran could have warned them. He did not. The second, the burning of King's Landing. Episode 5 of Season 8. Daenerys burns the city to the ground, along with its civilians, after the bells had already tolled to signal surrender. Tens of thousands of people die. People who did not fight. People who wanted to live. Bran had had several days before this moment. He had been watching Daenerys. He had seen her state of mind. He could see where her decisions were leading. He told Jon nothing specific. He did not warn the advisors. He did not try to stop what happened. The city burned. The third point calls for honesty. The Red Wedding. It is an event that some mention in the context of the theory. But here we must be clear. It takes place in the 3rd season when Bran is still a child on his way to the cave. He is only just beginning to realize his abilities. There is no reason to believe that he could have foreseen this event with the precision required to change anything. To accuse him of keeping silent about the Red Wedding is unfair within the framework of this theory. This is a genuine flaw, and I am pointing it out directly. The TV series Bran was too weak and inexperienced to be the puppet master at the time of the Red Wedding. But the first 2 instances occur after his powers have fully awakened, after he became the three-eyed raven. And it is precisely these that work. Now the key question, why keep quiet? If we accept this theory, one possible answer goes as follows. Bran saw several possible futures. He knew that the scenario in which he warns of Euron's fleet shifts the balance of power, preserves Daenerys' allies, and strengthens her position. This means that by the finale, she remains the rightful queen with an army and a fleet. And there is no place for Bran on the throne in that scenario. However, the scenario in which Daenerys burns King's Landing irrevocably destroys her reputation, forces Tyrion to reconsider his loyalty, compels Jon to make the hardest decision of his life, and leads the Council of Lords to begin searching for a new ruler. It is at that very moment that Tyrion delivers his speech. It is at that very moment that Bran is exposed. There is another argument in favor of this logic. Consider how Bran speaks to Jon after the coronation. Jon has just killed Daenerys. He comes to Bran, already knowing that he faces a life of exile with the Night's Watch, or more precisely, beyond its borders, into the lands of the free folk. He apologizes to his brother for not being able to be there for him, and Bran tells him, "You were exactly where you were meant to be." This might sound like consolation, like an acknowledgement of his brother's merits on a long journey. But if we accept the theory, this phrase takes on a different meaning. It is not consolation. It is a statement of fact. "You were exactly where you were meant to be" means precisely this. Every step Jon Snow took was part of the plan. His exile, his sacrifice, his suffering, all of it was necessary. All of it was part of the chain of events that led to the correct ending, to the ending that the three-eyed raven saw in advance. Jon took it as a consolation. The audience took it as a fine turn of phrase. But for the three-eyed raven, it might simply have been a statement of fact. That is not proof, it is an interpretation. But it explains silence as a system, rather than as indifference or a limitation of power. In the final episode of Season 8, something happens that many people didn't notice, because they were reeling from Daenerys' death and wondering what would become of Jon. Tyrion is imprisoned for treason. The Grey Worm is about to execute him. The situation seems hopeless. Then Tyrion is granted time for a meeting. He speaks with Bran, one-on-one. We don't know exactly what they discuss. This scene isn't shown on screen. The writers deliberately kept the content of the conversation under wraps. Viewers only see that Tyrion went in, and that afterwards he came out with a different expression on his face. Immediately afterwards, Tyrion delivers a speech to the Council of Lords. In this speech, he says that it is history that governs people, that whoever controls history controls the future, that Bran holds the history of the entire world, that he cannot have heirs, and that he himself says he has no need for power. It is a persuasive speech, the speech of an intelligent man who has found the right words. However, Tyrion delivers it immediately after a private conversation with Bran, of which not a single word has been revealed to the viewer. We do not know exactly what Bran said to Tyrion in private. We only know that, following this, Tyrion proposed him specifically. It is worth pausing here to consider a question that many have asked. If Bran saw his future on the Iron Throne, why did he need to meet with Tyrion? Couldn't he simply have waited? One answer is this: without a hint, Tyrion might not have reached the right conclusion. A clever man with the right argument at the right moment is already a ready-made tool. It was enough to give him a slight nudge, not to order him, not to persuade him, just to say something that would make a clever man reach the right conclusion on his own. This is, of course, pure speculation. We don't know what was said in that conversation, but it is precisely this lack of knowledge that makes the absence of the scene so telling. Bran replies, "Why do you think I've come here?" Let's examine this line carefully. There is no modesty in it, no surprise, no hesitation. A man who spent the entire 8th episode saying, "I don't need anything," suddenly frames his presence here as a deliberate journey towards this very moment. It is no coincidence, no mere twist of fate. He came here for this very reason. Isaac Hempstead Wright confirmed in an interview that this was a deliberate detail, that Bran didn't simply arrive, that the scene was intended to imply that he knew. Several journalists analyzing the finale wrote explicitly that the line suggests Bran had foreseen his ascension to the throne, that he knew, that he sat passively during the Great War and in the chaos that followed precisely because he knew. He just had to wait. The others would do everything for him. They would kill the Night King, they would kill Cersei, they would kill Daenerys, and at some point, someone clever would deliver the right speech at the right time. We now have enough evidence. Let's see if the theory stands up to the strongest counterargument. Let's examine the objections objectively. The theory is elegant, internally consistent, and explains a number of real anomalies. But it has some serious weaknesses. First and foremost, Bran, from the books. In the books, by the time of the 5th novel, A Dance with Dragons, Bran is only just beginning his training in the cave of the Three-Eyed Raven. He is not yet the Three-Eyed Raven. He is an apprentice. In his chapters, there is not a hint of him manipulating the political situation in Westeros. There are no scenes where he observes other characters with cold calculation. There are not even indirect signs that he is thinking about the throne. The Bran of the books is a boy who learns to fly in his dreams, sees the past through the faces of trees, and gradually loses something human in the process. This is a story of transformation, not a story of conspiracy. Martin is clearly taking a different approach. Not a story about a puppeteer, but a story about what a person becomes when they start to see everything at once. When the past becomes closer than the present. When one's identity begins to dissolve into a stream of other people's memories. This story may lead Bran to the throne, but the path there will be fundamentally different. The second weak point, the limits of his power. What exactly does the Three-Eyed Raven see? Does he see the future as a clear picture? Or does he receive only fragments, probabilities, symbols? This was never explicitly explained in the series. Hempstead Wright said in an interview with the New York Times that Bran tends to receive sensations about the future rather than precise visions. If that is the case, Bran's silence may not have been a strategic choice, but rather the result of incomplete information. He may have seen that something would happen, but not known when, or realized that any intervention on his part would alter the chain of events in an unpredictable way. Thirdly, and this is the most complex argument, the principle of the closed loop. The old Three-Eyed Raven said that the past is written, the ink is dry. The story of Hodor showed that Bran did not change the past. He created it. What happened was always meant to happen exactly as it did. A closed circle of cause and effect. If the world operates according to this model, then even if Bran saw the future, he understood that it was impossible to change it. Any action or inaction on his part was already part of what had been written. In this logic, his silence is not manipulation. It is the realization that it is impossible to act otherwise. He did not choose to remain silent. He had to remain silent. That is a strong objection, probably the strongest of all, and it makes the theory of manipulation itself considerably more complex. It is only then that his remark, "Why do you think I came here?" takes on an even more unsettling meaning. It is not a boast. It is a statement of fact. He did not choose to come. He had to come. And the city had to burn, and all the deaths had to happen. That is how it is written. The ink has dried. Is that good for the king? Would anyone want such a ruler over them? Now that all the evidence has been gathered, and all the counter-arguments have been thoroughly examined, let's put the whole picture together. If the theory is correct, the story of Game of Thrones unfolds as follows. From the moment Bran became the Three-Eyed Raven, he has been observing several possible futures. He saw or sensed that his path led to the Iron Throne. He gave the dagger to Arya because he knew or suspected that this particular blade would be needed to eliminate the main threat. He warged into the ravens above the Battle of Winterfell because he needed to guide the Night King to the right spot. He allowed Euron's fleet to strike without warning because it weakened Daenerys' position. He allowed King's Landing to burn because it rendered her unfit to rule in the eyes of her advisors. He arrived in King's Landing at the right moment. Perhaps, in private with Tyrion, he said something that steered the clever advisor in the right direction. And when Tyrion delivered his speech, Bran already knew how he would respond. In this version of the story, the Three-Eyed Raven is not a villain with a clear, malicious intent. It is something far more disturbing, a being that allows bad things to happen because they lead to the desired outcome. A being that considers itself entitled to make such decisions in silence. A being that sat by whilst the city burned and remained silent, knowing what would happen. A being that looked at Jon Snow and said, "You were exactly where you needed to be," failing to understand or refusing to understand that for Jon, this is no consolation. It is a sentence. Littlefinger had always said, "Chaos is a ladder." He lied, betrayed, and killed, and he lost. He was executed in the very place where he had begun. Bran spoke his words to his face as a verdict. But if the theory is correct, Bran used the very same principle. He did not ignite the chaos himself. He simply allowed others to ignite it. and he waited at the bottom, knowing that the ladder would lift him up of its own accord. The only difference between them was this: the little finger was visible. Bran remained invisible. Now for the book version. Here, the theory falls apart completely, and I admit this in all honesty. The Bran of the fifth novel is a child at the very beginning of his training. There is not a single scene suggesting any secret manipulation of the political situation. Martin is clearly constructing a different story, a story of the loss of humanity through merging with the Green Vision, a story of what it is like to see everything at once, to live simultaneously in all times. Thousands of voices, thousands of memories, and somewhere in this torrent, what was once Bran Stark is gradually drowning. If this storyline reaches its conclusion in the books, Bran on the throne will mean something entirely different. It is not a clever puppeteer who has won the game, but the transformation is complete. There is a fan theory worth mentioning, with the caveat that it is pure speculation, unsupported by any direct textual evidence. Some book fans believe that the real puppet master in Bran's story was not Bran himself, but the Bloody Raven, Brandon Rivers, the 1,000-year-old sorcerer in the tree, who had been reaching out to Bran in his dreams from the very beginning, lured him beyond the wall, and began to transform him into a new vessel for his will. In this interpretation, Bran was not in control of the game. He himself became someone else's pawn, and the one who moved the pieces had been sitting in the tree for several hundred years. Now that would be typical of Martin. The irony of victory lies in the fact that the victor did not know he was a pawn. Final assessment. Has the theory stood the test? Partly. Several clues hold up well and explain the genuine oddities in Bran's behavior during the final seasons. The fact that he handed the dagger to Arya, specifically, rather than to anyone else. His silence regarding Euron's fleet at a critical moment. His silence before the city was set alight. His unexplained barging into the ravens above the Battle of Winterfell. The line, "Why do you think I came here?" All of this adds up to a pattern that is difficult to explain away as coincidence or scriptwriting sloppiness. Two serious objections remain and refuse to go away. Firstly, Bran's book version does not support the manipulation theory. There is currently no material in the books to support this conclusion. Second, the principle of closed time renders the very word manipulation problematic. If Bran cannot alter what has been written, he is following an already existing path. In that case, his silence is not a choice. In that case, he has no choice at all. On a scale of plausibility, this theory falls somewhere between more likely than not and 50-50. In the TV series, given specific scenes and the line, "Why did I come here?" there are more arguments in favor of the theory. In the book version, the theory hardly holds water. The author's perspective. Martin adores characters who triumph not through force, but through patience, not through open combat, but through biding their time. Titian behind the chessboard, Littlefinger with his schemes, Varys in the shadows, Royce Bolton with his dry silence. These are all characters who do less than they are capable of, precisely because they know one must wait until others weaken themselves. Bran on the throne is a version of the same idea, radically amplified. A victor who saw every move ahead, who knew the outcome, who waited. This is thematically consistent with how Martin constructs political intrigue. But Martin also consistently shows that omniscience does not equal omnipotence, that seeing the future does not mean controlling it, that information without action is not power, but a burden. This works against the theory. It is also worth noting that the series creators themselves never provided a definitive answer as to how accurately Bran could see the future. They have given conflicting accounts in various interviews. This is either a deliberate ambiguity, allowing the viewer to decide for themselves, or an honest admission that the final seasons were written in a rush and not all the details were fully worked out. Both versions are possible, and both weaken the theory because if the writers themselves did not know the exact answer, then the theory itself relies on details that may simply have been poorly thought out. Titian behind the chessboard, the little finger with the stairs, Varys in the shadows. Bran on the throne is a version of the same idea, radically amplified. A victor who saw every move ahead. This is thematically consistent with how Martin constructs political intrigue. but Martin also consistently shows that omniscience does not equal omnipotence. That seeing the future does not mean controlling it. This works against the theory. For a definitive answer, we need the winds of winter and a dream of spring. The books we've been waiting for. They will make it clear where Martin is taking Bran. Are there hints in his chapters of a growing coldness? Of the first signs that he is using the green's eye for more than just observation? If so, the theory will gain a foundation. If not, it will remain a charming interpretation of the series finale. Here is my conclusion. Bran Stark was most likely not a deliberate villain who secretly orchestrated the deaths of thousands of people for the sake of the throne. That would be too cynical, even for the world Martin created. But I don't believe he was merely a passive bystander who just happened to be in the right place at the right time. The truth lies somewhere between these two extremes. The three-eyed raven saw several possible futures. Some led to peace, others to disaster. And he took minimal, almost imperceptible steps to steer the chain of events in the right direction. He passed on the dagger. He became the bait. He intervened at the right moment. He arrived in time. That might have been enough. Others finished the job. But there is another angle from which to view this whole story. When Mizentsev spoke of chaos as a ladder, he meant that a ladder is a tool used by those who are cold and calculating enough to climb over the pain of others. He said this with pride. For him, it was the philosophy of a winner. But the finale proved the opposite. He lost precisely because he was visible, because his calculation was too obvious, because his motivations were plain to see to those who knew how to look. Bran didn't need to climb, because the three-eyed raven doesn't participate in climbing. He isn't on the ladder. He looks down on it from above. From that vantage point, there is no chaos. There is only another chapter in a book already written. That is the most disturbing aspect of the theory about Bran the Puppet Master. Not that he might have manipulated events, but that if he did not manipulate them, if he simply knew and remained silent, it amounts to the same thing. Thousands of people died whilst he sat and waited. They died not because Bran betrayed them, but because, for the three-eyed raven, their deaths were part of a book that could not be corrected. The ink had dried, and the book was not written by him. At the start of this analysis, we spoke of 4 words that many overlooked. Why do you think I came here? Now look at this phrase in a different light. Not as a hint at a secret plan, but as a description of the very nature of the three-eyed raven. A being that sees everything cannot simply turn up somewhere without a reason. He does not act by chance. Every step is deliberate. Every silence is chosen. Every dagger he bestows has meaning. Not because he craved power, but because for the three-eyed raven, there is no difference between intention and destiny. Littlefinger had been climbing the ladder out of someone else's chaos his whole life. He reached the very top and fell. He was executed right where he'd started. Bran didn't climb anywhere. Bran waited at the bottom, whilst everyone else was scrambling, fighting, and falling. The ladder carried him to the top of its own accord. Puppet master or not, he seemed quite content with that. Because the ink has dried up. Let us know in the comments. Did the theory hold up or fall apart? Who do you think Bran the Broken is? A king who planned it all, or a being who simply knew what was written at the end? And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next analysis.